Oh hi! Today we're going to explain and explore a small but extremely potent utility module for Modular, the humble switched mult and the new Doepfer Quad Switch. So firstly, what is a switch multiple? Well, a switch multiple is a way of sending signals around a case by just flicking switches. By just flicking switches, I am effectively making patch connections and changing them instantaneously. So instead of literally moving a patch cable, it is able to do it on a sixpence. So it allows you to make fast changes in real time. Now, I've used switch mults to control the sending of drums around my case, and that's what kind of we'll explore as an example today, but all of these things transfer to any other aspect of your system. It could be clocking your system, it could be firing envelopes or voices. Obviously, gate signals can be used for anything in your case, so a switch multiple can have multiple uses. What I would also say about multiples is they're incredibly easy to DIY as well. You can see that whilst this is a Doepfer module, these are DIY modules that I have created. Because especially if you have these PCB panels, these blanking plates, you can just drill through them incredibly easy and solder them yourself. You just need to buy a load of sockets and switches. Okay, so firstly, to understand what a switch multiple does and a quad switch, we should first understand what is a multiple. So, at a fundamental level, a multiple is a module that allows you to take a signal. So, for example, that could be a gate trigger here, and I can put it into the multiple and get it out like this. And then, depending on the design of my multiple, it allows me to have copies of it sent elsewhere. So I plug in a third cable, and now if I plug this in, my gate signal here is being sent in here, coming out here, and two copies of it are going to the ALM squid sample, which is pretty sweet. So suddenly I'm able to take a simple kick and I'm able to use this to layer it up. So this kick is now comprised of two sounds working instantaneously and which I can control from my sequencer. So I'm able to fatten up a sound by layering it. Of course, this could be used for anything. This is modular. You can basically do anything with it. For example, I could have a master clock source going here, which was like the master clock speed of my whole system. And I could be using multiples to send that around the case to my various sequencer modules so that we're all being clocked by one master clock. And especially if you've got a really small modular, it becomes really important that you make use of the signals that you have. So a multiple gives you more of them. Whatever you have, you get more of it. But you may be screaming at the screen saying, Tish and Fipsy, I'm not going to waste space on a multiple when I've got stack cables. And I would agree with you to a degree, because I use and love stack cables. I have loads of these things. And what a stack cable is allowing you to do is it's kind of a multiple cable. So if I was to take a longer stack cable and plug it into here, we get our kicky thing. But then look, you see the stack cable's got this hole. I can then take another cable, jang it into the hole, and Bob's your uncle. We've created a multiple with just a cable, no module needed. And then what's extremely rad is if you have multiple stack cables, you can stack them. Keep stacking, keep stacking, keep stacking. I don't know what the theoretical limit to stacking is. I guess the limit is dependent on your braveness, ability to scale upwards in terms of height. And in this instance, just wanting to make kind of, sort of French house. Nice. So now that brings us on to why multiples are still valuable, because I love the stack cable as a concept. So the stack cable, when you just patch with these things alone, what is beautiful, and especially again if you have a small system, is you're putting stack cables into the holes. If you don't use stack cables and you are patching, you may end up with an interesting signal that you've created. And suddenly you're like, I want to send that signal to somewhere else now. So what you would have to do is unplug it and unplug everything that you're doing, reroute it into a multiple, then send all the copies out. Which means you have to stop, unplug loads of things, remember what you had plugged in, create a new patch so that you can split this signal off. What's really sweet about stack cables is you don't have to do that. You just patch naturally, and then if you suddenly think, oh, I want to do something else with that socket, well, it's just there, and you can just jam a thing into it. It's just a whole speedier process. But then, what I would still say is that in a case like this, which is my live case, when I close this case, I've got very little clearance on the inside, probably enough for 2 stack cables. In fact, I do somewhere, and I have had double stack cables, but I don't have enough space for 3. So that is unfortunately too deep and a little too risky, I would say, for getting bumped. 2 is kind of the maximum limit for a patch. And that's why it's still very valuable to have multiples in your system, because yes, you have to burn a little bit of space to put them in, but they're very robust. They're allowing you to get 6 copies of something with a very low height profile. And that is just something that you may not immediately think about. As soon as you actually patched up your wicked mega performance patch and you come to actually close it up to take it to a show, height becomes an issue. So a multiple is still valuable, even if you've got loads of stack cables. And as a final point on multiples, there's another product which is called the Hosa hopscotch. That's this funky cable where on one end, it's got like a socket, a plug, I should say. That's a plug. That's not a socket. This is a socket. So do you see it's got like a little socket hanging off of it? And so I can plug that into there, this into here, like that. And I've still got the socket available to me. It's a bit like a stack cable, but it's not built in here. And what's advantageous, although the Hosa hopscotch does have quite a big socket here, what I have discovered is you can stack from that extra socket, which is cool because in this system, so you end up with that, but that is very easy to tuck into the bottom. Like for example, along here, along the, along the face of the modules where it isn't going to get in the way. So that's actually a really efficient way using a hopscotch and stack cables in combination. You can end up with this ability to have really, really long stackers, not using a multiple. So something to think about. The other thing, by the way, is things like this. This is called knuckle bones. And then you can also get, made by Hosa, by the way, and then you can also get these headphone splitters. You can use these to split signals and share them around a case. It's a small but very important thing. You'll end up with all like 5 or 6 of these options because they suit different situations. Now, onto switch multiples. So here is the switch multiple that I built. Now, I was basically copying the Doepfer A182, which I will throw up on screen, which looks very similar. There is a difference though, and I'll come to that in a sec. First, let's just explore what a switch multiple does. So a switch multiple has these special switches which have 3 positions: a middle, a left, and a right. So they can be middle, left, or right. Now, if you have these in the middle, these sockets are not connected together at all. Anything that you plug in ignores everything else that is plugged into it. But if I flick the switches to the same side, I have now connected all 4 of these things together exactly in the way that a multiple works. So what I'm going to do is I will plug that kick output back into the top here. I will plug this, say this one here, the 3rd one down. I will stick it into our kick input. And as promised, I will flick these switches so they're not in the center position, but these 2 are on the same side. In this instance, left. See that? So now as long as the switches are both on the same side, and it could be left or it could be right, then it will connect these two sockets for as long as I have them switched on the same side. You can see I can start to perform that as a muting tool, and I can push either the top one to mute it or the other one, doesn't matter. I've just broken the connection. And so that simple concept is amazingly powerful. You've effectively got a mutes module just from a switch multiple, because you're able to decide whether it's connected or not. And one sort of important thematic point, because it looks weird, there's no ins and outs, are there? There's nothing labeled in and there's nothing labeled out. And that's because depending on how you have it patched, they are ins or outs. There's no such thing. It's just, you're just creating a common sort of group, as it were. And it becomes useful, perhaps if you've not done this with like a black faceplate, but do it with a white one, that you can write on, that's an in, that's an out, to help you remember the things that you've got plugged into these. But there is no in and out. It just depends how you patch it, really. And the only sort of rule that is always worth bearing in mind is it's bad to have too many ins going into a switch multiple. Don't use a switch multiple as a mixer. And that is going to be slightly confusing, because I am actually going to try and use it as a kind of mixer in a second, but only for gate signals, not for continuous voltages. Don't mix continuous voltages with a multiple, because you can end up doing things where you send loads of voltage into outputs and not inputs, which can cause all manner of problems. So just use it as a way of combining gates if you combine anything with it. Ideally, you just use them as a way of sending things around a case. And so here I go, that's that. And if I plug another cable in, I'm going to go into 4 and connect. Nice. Again, I can perform this stuff. So we've got copies. Comes in here, 2 copies out. However, what if I flip this one, which was the hats out, it's going to the hats input. If I flip that to the left, and then I go like this, well then of course, I can then choose whether I'm sending that signal to the kick or the hat. And then if I'm crafty, I can just flip this and double it up. So in this way, you're choosing, am I sending something out of this output, or am I sending it to the both things at the same time? It's totally up to you how you switch it out. So really, really useful for performance. Now, the reason that switch multiples came to my attention is because of my darling modular crush, Stevio, who does amazing live stuff with his modular. And Stevio uses switch multiples as a kind of like gate combining tool. So he has lots of kind of sparse gates that he sends into the switch multiple, and he uses the switch multiple as a way of combining them together, which is really nice. And we can kind of try that, and hopefully it won't cause any damage, because as I said, it's not ideal that you mix gates together, but we can give it a go. So in this instance, this Euclidean circle's top channel is going to be this one here, I think. Yes. And then let's take output 3, and let's see if we can get away with it. I will create a slightly different rhythm. Now you see that. So that is a combination of 1 and 3 together being mixed by the mix multiple, the switch multiple. So in this way, we've combined 2 simple rhythms to make 1 complex rhythm. And there's maybe another application that I could do here, which is something that I was thinking about when I made my last case video, talking about this idea that I've got a really complex kick pattern, and I want to be able to revert to a really simple 4/4 as an option. And I can totally do that using this system. So if I plug in 2 into this, so when I say 2, this is output 2 from Euclidean circles is now going into here. Here we've got the right hand side is the output of 1 and 3, But if I turn this off and flip it to the left and then flip this to the left, now I've just hooked up the output of 2 to the kick. And by just flipping the kick from right to left, I have created the functionality that I wanted. I've got a nice complex kick pattern that is actually out of the combination of the top 1 and 3, or I can mute and then flip back to a nice steady 4/4. So you can then perform that change. And I would say, like, I still find it concerning, the idea of combining voltages, gate voltages together using a switch multiple. There is a low gain module called a short bus, which is a sort of diode protected version of this. And I would probably recommend using that, and certainly doing experiments before doing any kind of live performance. I just don't know. It's the potential of damaging modules. I just want to sort of give you a massive caveat there, but it's cool. And with just a simple passive module that needs no power and that we can build ourselves. Really cool. Now, one other like functional point is that the Doepfer A182, Doepfer, I should say, get it right, is if you have all of the switches, you know, the top switch here on the right and the bottom switch here on the right, I believe on the Doepfer, then these would be connected together. However, what I have done on my DIY version is slightly different. And I have in fact cut the cable here, or the connection between the sides. So in fact, my switch multiple is made up of 2 sets of 4. So these can be connected together, this top 4, but they will never be able to be connected to the bottom 4. And in this way, I found it far more useful to have 2 sets of 4 ins and 4 outs than 1 set of 8 in and 8 outs. And that may be something that you want to bear in mind if you have a go at building one of these yourself. I will show you the back of this thing. You can see that the grounds are connected together from the 4 to the 4. And then you connect the outer pins, and then you connect the middle pin to the tip, I think. Yes. I don't know what type of switches these are. I can't remember. So I'll put it in the description what the type of switches are, and you can have a go at making one of these if you're so inclined. Finally, we come to this new thing, the Doepfer A182-2. I want to thank Dave Menard, who sent me a message to recommend this module, because what I was struggling with in my previous vid was I was using the grid sequencer to fire into the ALM squid sample. And the grids is a drum sequencer by Mutable Instruments that only has 3 outputs. And the squid sample is an amazing sample module from ALM that has 8 inputs. 3 out, 8 in. We have a problem. Because if I used a switch multiple, it wouldn't give me enough control. I would have such a limited capacity for sending things around. And what I would say that is, in the heat of battle, it can be confusing remembering which is an in, which is an out, which side is connected to what is going to what is the what is the what? Enter the A182-2 Quad Switch. So this is a switched multiple as well, but this works in a fundamentally different way to this one. What this lets us do is send one thing to 2 different places, but only choose one of them at once. So I can't do the layering thing, but it's very, very good for the routing thing. For such a small module, I'm able to send 4 things to 8 different places with the flick of a switch, including mutes. So let me illustrate. So I'm going to plug in that kick drum again into 1. And if you look very carefully, and this may be very difficult to see, but that center connects either to the one above it or the one below it. There is a little icon that in a weird way looks like the socket is a kind of little character holding a sort of baton and is about to tap the baton to the one above or below it. So if I connect this to the kick and I connect the one below it to, let's say, the number 6, the tom, and then using this switch, I send it to the kick if it's up, and if I stop and push it down, it goes to the tom. Nice. And it's a mute in the middle. So do you see, this is like, So what I could do, depending on how I'd sort of arrange my samples in the Squid sample, I could perhaps have two different types of kick. Or I could perhaps be sending on the top one, I could send it into the Squid, and the bottom one I could be sending into the prop kick. So I could manage two different types of kicks as part of a set, and then have mute in the middle. Cool. So I can continue this principle, and let's do that because, you know, we're here. So if I go 2, 2, 2 to the input, and then there to 3, and then I will plug this one in to something else. Let's try 8, not sure what we've got there. Nice. Very nice. All right. Shall we continue? Let's continue. So we'll go into 3. And then I will go top of 3 into 6. Bottom of 3 into 7. Because there's often kind of other stuff. Oh yeah, Tom's. Hi, Tom. Ooh. Huh. So you start to see what happens. Then this becomes like a sound selector. And of course, what I can't do is I can't have all 8 of these sounds being triggered at the same time, but that's not what I want. I want to be able to more efficiently use a small amount of gate signals and just send them to different sounds mid-set. So you can just be like, oh, now we're going to a different place. We have a different kind of sound. And then to have control over the kicks, mute is obviously hugely important. It just becomes a very practical way of, with a small amount of gates and a lot of places to send them, that you can actually manage that and perform it and actually have a sense of what's going on. You could even label these so that you would know what sounds you were going to get. So, really simple concept, but incredibly powerful and fundamentally different to the way that the switch multiple works. I would say better for this particular application, where I have a few things and I want to send them to lots of different places. But wait, there's more. There's one more thing before you go that I'd like to show you with the A182-2. And if you have been listening to my podcast, which is called Why We Bleep, it's a podcast about electronic music, and in it I meet some wonderful people, and one of the conversations I had was with Subfocus. And in my conversation with Subfocus, drum and bass legend and all-round lovely chap, I talked about the idea of I wanted a way of having 2 completely independent sequences, one here and one there, and one destination. That would be like a voice, like an Acid 303 type thing. And I would, with a switch, be able to pick which of the pitches that I was receiving, maybe from one sequencer or maybe from the other, and which gate pattern I was receiving, maybe from one sequencer or maybe the other. And I sort of figured, yeah, you could probably build that if you had like a really complicated switch and, you know, da-da-da-da. Well, it's this. It's the A182-2. That's what that module is. And I'm going to patch that up now. 1 second. Oh yeah, look at that. So yes, that question of like, oh, should I get a Stepper Acid or should I get Metropolis? Well, let's pit them head to head. The answer is you should obviously get both. Okay, so in this slightly more like intense final example, what I've done is I've got the quad switch hooked up so that I've got 2 sequences available, the Metropolis and the Stepper Acid, and they're going into the Acid Lab M303. And this is gate, and this is pitch. And so at the top, I have the Stepper Acid, and at the bottom, I've got the Metropolis. So I can choose the Metropolis as my gate source, turn it off to mute, or choose the Stepper Acid as my gate source. And then I can choose the pitch source, Metropolis at the bottom, or Stepper Acid at the top. And then I have the switched multiple to control drums. So I can pick from 2 different sounds with mute. Mute the pitch so it drops to its like root note. Flipping between the two. So this is a combination. Gates from one, pitch from the other. Switch multiples, quad switch, the humble multiple, and of course the stack cable, and various combinations thereof. Small but important, you need them. If you enjoyed this, please consider sponsoring on Patreon. That is the best way to help this channel. Or buy my music on Bandcamp, or just be nice and leave a comment and subscribe, okay? Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Bye.